Raymond once adjusted his tie in my foyer mirror, glanced at me like a speck on the hardwood floor, and said to Claire, "He reminds me of one of those rubber plants in doctors' offices. Always there, but you don't notice unless it's dying." Claire laughed. I was 2 feet away, holding a tray of wine glasses for her charity dinner. I nodded, smiled, refilled his glass. Then I went back to the study, locked the door, and logged into my private server. They think silence is weakness, that men who don't interrupt, don't interfere, and don't make scenes must be dull, useless, or worst of all, safe. Claire wore that belief like a perfume, expensive, cloying, and completely toxic. She was the kind of woman who didn't walk. She presented. Every gala, every function, every female founders-in-law brunch. She was there, framed perfectly in Instagram squares, legal jargon on her lips, Raymond often not far behind her like an aftershave trail. My mentor, she'd call him. Then her co-counsel. Then, when I stopped asking, just Ray. The man once left a cufflink in our laundry room. A monogrammed one. I picked it up, placed it in the drawer where Claire kept old birthday cards from clients and half-used perfume. She never asked about it. Never noticed it missing. That told me more than any confrontation could. Look, I wasn't born yesterday. I know how this plays. Middle-aged husband. High-flying wife. Everyone assumes he's the dead weight. The one clinging. She joked once at a barbecue, my birthday, mind you, that I never really left the shallow end of the pool. Her friends laughed. Raymond smirked. I toasted them, then slipped inside and wrote down the license plate of the car he drove. 2 weeks later, I had his bar association record, his offshore asset declarations, and a full scan of the ghost firm he ran under a false partner's name. I'll admit, if you're still here reading, you probably didn't expect that turn. Most don't. That's the problem. You can hide a hell of a lot when no one's looking at you. By the way, while I have you, if you're one of the 97% of folks who watch or listen to stories like this and don't subscribe, consider it. It helps the team bring more quiet revenge and well-earned justice into the world. Because trust me, stories like mine aren't fiction. They're just well-organized facts no one asked about. Back to Claire. See, she loved to narrate me to people. Daniel? He's sweet. Simple. My rock. I heard that so often I started to wonder if I should just get engraved. What she meant was I didn't interrupt her orbit, didn't pull focus, didn't threaten her narrative. But I listened. I watched. I learned. Her tone shifted after promotion to equity partner. She started correcting me in public. Not big things. Not shut up, Daniel, or anything so gauche. Just microcuts. He doesn't really get investing. Or, he still pays bills manually. Can you believe that? Tiny barbs, but every dinner with colleagues turned into open mic night where I was the punchline. I tracked them. Every comment. Every incident. Not to throw in her face, but to observe the arc. Emotional trends matter. Especially in someone who builds their career on rhetoric and framing. Claire didn't just believe her version of events. She weaponized it. And Raymond? He sharpened the blade. It was in their body language. The split-second glances. The hand on her lower back during case reviews. I watched him enter our Wi-Fi once using the guest password I gave Claire. His device name? Slick Ray Litigator. I kid you not. The irony? I was the one who funded her bar exam, ghostwrote her first law articles, and built the portfolio site that got her noticed. But I never put my name on it. That was my flaw until it became my edge. I started sleeping in the guest room because of my snoring. That's what she told people. Truth was, I wanted the distance. It's easier to track an organism when you aren't tangled in its fur. I kept receipts, documents, audio recordings from ambient mics I placed in the office printer and beneath the kitchen bar. Not to trap her, to confirm what I already knew. And what I knew was this. She thought she had me pegged. A boring man. A harmless man. A man whose greatest act of rebellion was mixing whites and colors in the wash. But what Claire didn't realize, what neither of them did, was that still water doesn't mean no current. Sometimes it just means the undertow is waiting. Claire once threw a real estate brochure across the breakfast table like it was some kind of prize. Can you believe the market in Ashford? "This lot doubled in 6 months," she said, sipping green juice like a mogul. I nodded and cleared her plate. What she didn't know was that I already had the deed records bookmarked, because the land wasn't in her name. It was in the name of a shell company 2 layers deep, managed by Raymond's cousin. Claire liked to pretend she was the architect of her empire, but she was building on borrowed scaffolding. While she spent nights at the firm, I logged into court databases under a rotating series of proxies. I routed through a disused server rack I kept in the basement. I wasn't spying, I was archiving. They say power leaves fingerprints. Claire left palm prints. Every co-signed LLC, every consulting check deposited from client trust funds, every board appointment she collected like charms on a bracelet. I had them filed, flagged, and sorted. And not just in case. I wasn't planning for divorce. I was planning for detonation. The first time I found a contract Raymond had ghostwritten for a startup she mentored, I highlighted the clauses that would later qualify as self-dealing. Then I cross-referenced the signatures. 3 matched a notary from Claire's old law school. Her Christmas card list was doing legal favors now. Cute. What really clinched it, though, wasn't financial. It was the paperweight on her desk. Brass. Heavy. Engraved with CLA Partners LLP 2020. She told me it was a gift from the firm. But during a routine property search, I found the same logo tied to a holding company in Delaware. No employees, no revenue, just ownership stakes in 6 subsidiaries, including 2 shell companies linked to land we co-financed. I traced them all. I built a diagram. It looked like a spider web, centered around her ego, framed by his ambition. They underestimated me like people underestimate ceiling tiles. Plain, predictable, always overhead, never important, until one shifts and exposes the wiring. And their arrogance? It helped me. Raymond once emailed Claire from a shared work terminal. I know because she used my backup printer to check something and forgot to delete the cache. The email read, "Once the trust rolls over in March, we move his portion clean. Tell him it's for tax reasons if he asks." I printed that one on acid-free paper, put it in a fireproof folder, labeled it Act 2. See, they operated under the illusion that silence equals ignorance. That if a man doesn't throw plates or demand answers, he must be lost in the fog. What they never grasped is that some men build in silence. Some men design exits, quietly reinforce support beams, and memorize evacuation routes, while their partners rehearse TED Talks about partnership. Claire once said, during a wine-fueled dinner with Raymond, "I know Daniel wouldn't survive a real negotiation. He still balances our checkbook." They laughed. I smiled, because the checkbook they dismissed was tied to a ledger system I wrote myself. It tracked every dollar that ever left our accounts, including the ones loaned to her LLCs or used to pay a branding consultant who also happened to be Raymond's ex-girlfriend. They called it love. They called it growth. They called it strategy. I called it evidence. And you want to know the real kicker? Claire used my laptop once when hers crashed. Opened a tab marked photography. It was a decoy. She clicked through thumbnails of sunsets and old travel shots. What she didn't know was that each photo was embedded with steganographic data, metadata hidden in pixels, financial ledgers, ownership logs, transaction dates. She looked right at them, smiled, said, "You should frame some of these." I almost laughed. Some people hide secrets in vaults. I hid them in plain sight, because the best lies aren't the ones you bury. They're the ones you wear as wallpaper. They thought I was gathering dust in the corner of their empire. But I wasn't gathering dust. I was gathering proof. The envelope came on a Wednesday. Courier signature required. Claire made sure it arrived midday while I was still at work. She knew I'd open it at my desk, away from anyone who might lend support. She was thoughtful like that. Inside, crisp white paper, embossed letterhead from Raymond's firm, and a cheerful phrase just under the date. Petition for dissolution of marriage, irreconcilable differences. No handwritten note, no courtesy text. Just one sterile declaration that the story was over, neatly typed, footnoted, and served. I didn't flinch. I scanned the filing, sipped my coffee, and marked the corner of the page with a pencil, not a pen. I wasn't writing anything permanent yet, but I was outlining. Claire must have expected tears. Maybe a voicemail. Possibly a rash counterproposal about therapy or second chances. She got none of it. I didn't call. I didn't show up at her office. I didn't even message her mutual friends. I just sent back a single-line reply to her attorney's assistant. Acknowledged. Will respond in due course. Her assistant replied within minutes. Thank you for your professionalism, Mr. Price. Claire was hoping we could keep this clean. Clean. That word again. I remember the first time Claire used it to describe our marriage. She was on the phone with her sister. I'd made dinner, her favorite, lemon risotto, and overheard her say, "It's a clean relationship. No drama, no noise." Honestly, sometimes I forget we're even married. That sentence never left me. Now here she was, repeating the sentiment in legal form. She wanted a clean cut, an easy extraction. She thought I'd fold like dry laundry. Raymond leaned in during our first mediation. The bastard even wore a red tie like it was a game show. "Look, Daniel," he said, like we were old friends sharing beers after work. "We want this smooth. Claire's not after blood. She just wants what's fair. You keep your pension, she keeps the condo, and we divide what's left. We're doing this clean. You walk out with what's left." I looked at him for a long second. Not hostile, not even angry, just patient. He mistook the silence for defeat. Claire did too. She nodded like a queen granting a generous pardon. "I think that's best," she said. "No reason to drag it out." Of course she didn't want to drag it out. The longer it went, the more threads could be pulled. And threads, I knew, led to rooms she'd never want anyone seeing. They assumed I had nothing to lose. No children. No shared business. The condo had been put in her name for tax simplicity. The car? Her firm's lease. Our joint savings? Casually emptied 3 months before she filed, during a portfolio rebalancing. According to Claire's affidavit, I was walking away with my dignity and a small retirement plan. She never once paused to ask why I wasn't fighting. That was the beauty of it, because it wasn't a reaction. It was a reset. She told people I was taking it well, that I was oddly mature about the whole thing. One of her colleagues even joked that I was the most passive man in America. I made no noise, no demands, no attempts to guilt her or beg for reconciliation. No groveling. That unsettled her more than any tantrum would have. Raymond didn't help. He egged her on. "This'll be textbook." I once overheard him say on a call Claire forgot to mute while she was home. "He's spineless. By the time it hits court, he'll be grateful we left him a coffee mug." Spineless. That's what they called it. But the truth? You can't see a spine from above unless you bend the body over, and I wasn't bent. I was upright. I was preparing. While they drafted settlement papers, I updated my logs. While they smirked across mediation tables, I archived one more batch of encrypted files. While they slept soundly, I checked bank cross-references and reviewed asset positions under their associated shell names. And most importantly, while Raymond thought I'd walk out with what was left, I was getting ready to show him what was mine to begin with. Let him laugh. Let her nod. Let them toast to their clean little ending. They thought the curtain had dropped, but I hadn't even stepped on stage yet. Courtrooms have a strange scent. Paper, sweat, disinfectant, and a faint whiff of arrogance when lawyers arrive in tailored suits too tight for their egos. Claire wore white, of course. She always had a flair for symbolism. Pure, untouched, innocent. Like this wasn't a hostile takeover in pearls. Raymond walked beside her, polished and sharp, like a peacock who'd memorized courtroom choreography. They laughed with the bailiff, made small talk with the clerk, and shook hands with the judge like it was a reunion. The judge, Harold Grayson, grinned too wide for a man meant to be impartial. I recognized the photo on his desk. Fishing trip. Him and Raymond smiling with beers. The kind of friendship forged on boats and backroom deals. Then I walked in. No entourage. No flashy entrance. Just me. Navy blazer. The same scuffed briefcase Claire once mocked because it looked like something a substitute teacher would carry. Inside was a single manila folder. I didn't bother with a rolling cart or a laptop or a legal pad to scribble nothing on. I didn't need to perform. Raymond turned, saw me, smirked. Pro-se? Bold, he said, loud enough to carry. A little wink to the courtroom, like he was warming up the crowd. Claire didn't even look. She was too busy organizing her statement binder like it was a wedding program. I didn't answer him. I walked forward, calm, precise. I placed my folder in front of the clerk and nodded once. Harold leaned over his bench, eyes amused. "Mr. Price, you're choosing to represent yourself today?" "Yes, Your Honor." He raised a brow, already halfway through dismissing me. "Very well. Let's proceed." It was a circus after that. Claire's opening was a monologue about personal growth, mutual parting, and how we simply evolved in different directions. It sounded rehearsed, probably because it was. Raymond's follow-up was sharper, filled with jargon meant to paint me as passive, financially dependent, and his favorite phrase, unaware of the intricacies of Claire's professional life. I sat through it all like a churchgoer at a sermon I'd already read the ending to. When it was my turn, I didn't launch into a speech. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even stand longer than necessary. I handed the judge a single page, my motion to admit supplemental documentation. Harold skimmed it, annoyed. "You'll need to provide context, Mr. Price. This isn't a deposition." I nodded. "I understand. The documents speak for themselves. But if context is required, I'm prepared." He gestured. "You have 5 minutes." I opened the manila folder and handed the clerk 3 sealed packets. One for the judge, one for Claire, one for Raymond. They opened them in unison like some bizarre synchronized sport. Claire blinked. Once, twice. Her mouth opened, then shut. Raymond furrowed his brow, flipped through pages faster, slower, then stopped entirely on a notarized transfer document dated 3 years ago. Harold read in silence. His smile died slowly. Inside those packets were 6 documents. Deed assignments from the Ashford property Claire claimed as her personal investment, showing it was acquired with funds wired from a trust she never acknowledged. Corporate registration linking that trust directly to CLA Holdings, the same holding company Claire swore under oath had no ties to marital assets. Patent filings dated 18 months before Claire's first startup legal clinic, all with my name as the principal inventor, signed off by a silent partner in her second LLC. Raymond's name on a board minutes log approving the reallocation of profits from a firm under investigation for insider dealing. Minutes he'd sworn under oath he was never present for. And finally, a 1-page affidavit, signed, sealed, stamped, from a managing partner at a boutique venture fund, stating that Claire and Raymond jointly funneled investor capital into a fake consultancy for tax purposes. They thought they were watching a man show up to bleed. They didn't realize I came to dissect. The judge sat back slowly, folded his hands. "Mr. Price," he said, finally, "are you the same Daniel Price listed as primary trustee on Caledon Fund Group?" "Yes, Your Honor." Claire's pen rolled off the table. She didn't pick it up. Raymond muttered something under his breath. His hands shook. The judge cleared his throat. "In light of these materials, this court will need to recess and review potential conflict of interest, specifically regarding current representation and asset entanglement." Claire finally spoke, voice low, brittle. How did you?" I didn't look at her. I just adjusted my folder, stood up, and said the first full sentence of the day. Sometimes the quietest man in the room is the only one who bothered to listen. Then I walked out. The silence behind me said more than Raymond ever could. The ink on the settlement page hadn't even dried. Raymond slid it across the table like a used napkin at a country club, smiling like a man handing over a discount coupon he thought was charity. Claire didn't look at me. She stared at her nails. French tip. Perfect. The kind of woman who wouldn't soil her fingers even to bury a body. She'd hire someone to do it, then post a brunch selfie the next day. "Let's just get this over with," Raymond said, adjusting his cufflinks like he was about to close a merger, not gut a man. "You'll find it's generous considering the circumstances. You keep the 401k, your car, a few minor equities. Everything else remains with Claire. The business assets, obviously, stay where they originated. I didn't respond. I just opened the folder in front of me. There's not mine. I flipped through each page slowly, thoroughly, line by line like a surgeon inspecting a contaminated organ. Claire had the audacity to whistle under her breath. It's fair, Daniel. You weren't really involved in the legal side of things. This just formalizes what's already true. I paused on page 4. Line 32. Daniel Price hereby waives all rights, present and future, to the intellectual property of CLA Partners LLP, including but not limited to pending patents, technology filings, and associated equity vehicles. I almost smiled, not because I was amused, because I had written that clause, not for them, years ago, for a company that had tried to sneak a similar poison pill into a co-founder's exit. I remembered the language because I'd coined it. Back then, I told the CEO, "This'll work, if the guy's asleep." Raymond looked at me like a butcher waiting for a cow to lie down. "Sign this. Be done with it." I closed the file softly. "No." Claire finally looked up. "What?" I said no. Raymond chuckled. "Daniel, come on. Be reasonable. You don't want this dragging out. Trust me. You'll lose more in discovery than you'll keep." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's advice," he replied. "The judge is my buddy. You're walking out broke if you push this. Don't mistake the silence for leverage. You've got none." It was then, finally, that I looked him in the eye. The first real look since all this began. The kind of look you give a man seconds before the floor drops beneath him. "He has no idea who I am." Raymond froze. Claire squinted like she just realized the floor plan of her own house was wrong. See, they built this whole circus around one central assumption, that I was nobody. Just the guy who fixed the garbage disposal, remembered their dentist appointments, and filed taxes on TurboTax like a chump. They saw me as a man with no teeth, no weapons, no spine. They saw a husk. But the thing about assumptions, they don't survive daylight. Raymond opened his mouth again. "Daniel, let's not. Let's—" I interrupted. I leaned forward just an inch. Enough for him to see that something had shifted. My eyes weren't tired anymore. My voice wasn't tentative. There was weight in it now. "You think this paper is protection," I said, tapping the top page. "It's not. It's a confession. You wrote it expecting compliance. But what you actually did was codify every asset transfer, every suspicious licensing clause, and every omission that ties you to her business holdings as more than just counsel." He blinked. "That's absurd." "No, Raymond. What's absurd is thinking I didn't see this coming. What's absurd is underestimating a man who spent 3 years mapping every illegal favor you did to impress the woman you were screwing." Claire whispered something. I didn't hear it. Probably didn't matter. Raymond leaned back, the smirk finally slipping. "You're bluffing. If you think that," I said, reaching for my folder this time, "you haven't looked hard enough at what isn't in this room." Raymond looked at Claire. Claire looked at nothing. The judge returned from chambers and asked, "Are we ready to proceed?" Raymond cleared his throat. We need a moment." I stood up, straightened my jacket. "No," I said. "We're ready." They thought they'd walked me into a trap. They didn't realize the trap was already closed, and they were the ones inside it. There's a sound that paper makes when it slides across lacquered wood, smooth, hissing, final. I placed the sealed envelope in front of the judge like a slow-playing card in a crooked poker game. No theatrics, just a gesture, quiet, measured, lethal. "Your Honor," I said, "I'd like to submit supplemental documentation relevant to the asset classification and disclosures made by the petitioner and her counsel." Harold Grayson didn't look thrilled. "Mr. Price, we've already reviewed the standing disclosure packet." "Yes, sir," I replied calmly. "This isn't standing. It's structural." He blinked once, motioned to the clerk. "Very well. Let's proceed." Claire didn't move. Raymond scoffed, and leaned back like I just handed over a lunch receipt. "Another printout of your checking account? Let's hope the judge appreciates effort." He wasn't laughing 60 seconds later. The clerk opened the envelope, extracted the documents, and distributed copies. I stood silent as the first pages were flipped. No eye contact, no grandstanding. I let the sound of realization do the work. First page, ownership records of the Navarro Private Trust, founded 8 years prior. Trustee name, Daniel Price. Primary holdings, equity stakes in 7 limited partnerships, including CLA Holdings LLC. Claire blinked. Second page, patent assignments. 3 of them, all for proprietary legal intake software and back-end data protection systems. All dated before CLA Partners LLP was incorporated. All signed over by me to a shell company on purpose and quietly licensed back to CLA through what they assumed was a generic tech vendor. Raymond squinted. Third page, a notarized affidavit. From a man named Timothy Levon, a name Raymond knew intimately. Tim was the silent partner in Halcyon Ventures, the fund Raymond once advised during a friends and family raise to boost CLA's second expansion. In the affidavit, Tim stated, under penalty of perjury, that Raymond failed to disclose personal, romantic, and financial ties to a co-founder, Claire, during contract negotiation. That meant one thing: conflict of interest, judicially relevant, potentially disbarable. Raymond's pen clattered to the floor. Claire's smile cracked like a wineglass under pressure. Then came the moment, the one I'd been waiting for. Raymond leaned forward, eyes narrow, voice lower now, almost reverent. You're that Daniel Price? I met his gaze, unblinking. The one whose name you erased from 3 provisional patents? The one you assumed Claire was carrying all these years? I leaned in slightly, just enough. Yes. Claire's voice was barely audible. You said you never wanted to be part of the business. I didn't want the spotlight, I replied, but I built the stage, and the lights, and the wiring that powered every show you put on. The judge cleared his throat, but his eyes never left the affidavit. Mr. Price, is it accurate that you maintain fiduciary control over CLA Holdings, including Initial Series B capital and licensing vehicles related to its tech infrastructure? Yes, Your Honor. Claire gripped the table like it was slipping out from under her. Raymond opened his mouth, then closed it again. That silence? That was the moment I stopped being the invisible man in the back of the room and became the man who owned the room they stood in. They didn't just miss the name, they missed the foundation, and now it was no longer beneath them. It was crumbling beneath their feet. At first, Judge Grayson flipped through the documents with the same breezy detachment he'd shown since the start of the hearing. His robe shifted as he leaned back, lips pressed together in a half-smile, eyes darting over the first 2 pages like he already had the ending written in his head. But by page 3, his smile faded. His left hand, the one holding the corner of the file, stopped moving. Then, slowly, he adjusted his glasses and began reading again, this time word by word. The room, moments ago puffed with courtroom smugness, started to shrink. Claire crossed her legs, then uncrossed them. Raymond scratched his cheek twice, then reached for a glass of water that wasn't there. No one spoke. The bailiff actually leaned forward in his chair like he was watching a car accident unfold in slow motion. Judge Grayson's brow furrowed. He turned to the clerk. Confirm these documents were submitted under sworn affidavit? Yes, Your Honor. Time-stamped and sealed. He exhaled, looked at me. Mr. Price, is it accurate you maintain controlling interest in CLA Holdings, LLC, as outlined in this trust record? Yes, Your Honor. A pen tapped once against the bench. That includes ownership stake in the legal firm currently representing the petitioner? Yes. Raymond visibly paled. Claire turned her head just slightly toward him, not enough to draw attention, but enough for me to see the whisper through clenched teeth. You told me this wasn't possible. The judge didn't need to hear her. His eyes were already there. He stared at the affidavit again, then at the notary signature, then finally at Raymond. Mr. Delacroix, were you aware of Mr. Price's stake in the firm when you accepted representation of the petitioner? Raymond cleared his throat. That ownership is not public record, Your Honor. It's behind a trust. So you didn't conduct conflict of interest verification? I was unaware there was a need. Grayson shut the file. No flourish. Just a soft thud that felt louder than a gavel. Conflict of interest is clear. Mr. Delacroix, I'm issuing a temporary suspension of your representation pending internal review. Ms. Kavanaugh, you will be given an opportunity to seek new counsel. Claire opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The judge continued. This court is adjourned pending a full ethics review of petitioner's filings, representation conflicts, and asset origination. We will reconvene in 10 business days. All standing motions are frozen. Mr. Price, thank you for your transparency. He rose. The gavel finally dropped. Not as punctuation, but as demolition. Raymond leaned toward Claire again, whispering something that must have included the word trust, because she flinched. The bailiff approached me respectfully. You're clear to go, sir. I gathered my folder slowly. Claire stared at me now. No more pretending I wasn't real. No more dismissive glances or patronizing smiles. Her expression wasn't anger. It was the expression of someone seeing a ghost sit in the chair they thought they'd burned. She stood as I walked past. Daniel, she said softly, this isn't you. I stopped. No, this is me. You just preferred the version that smiled while you lied. Raymond didn't say a word. He was still seated, shoulders hunched, hands folded, like a schoolboy caught copying the wrong exam. Behind me, the judge's clerk whispered something into a phone. Probably the ethics board. Outside the courtroom doors, the hallway was colder than I remembered. But I didn't feel cold. I felt gravity shifting, like someone had finally righted the planet under my feet. And behind those heavy doors, Claire and Raymond weren't just losing a case. They were losing the floor. The legal community loves gossip more than justice. And Claire, once the darling of boutique litigation circles, was now center stage for all the wrong reasons. Raymond's disqualification hit headlines within hours. Not front page, not scandalous, but just enough to ripple through the network of partnerships she'd spent years building. No salacious details, just a sterile phrase tucked inside a legal brief. Counsel withdrawn pending ethics review. In our world, that's blood in the water. Claire acted fast. She always did. She called in favors, reached out to old classmates, even tried to pivot the narrative. It's a misunderstanding, she told one managing partner. We've already resolved the matter. But the problem wasn't the story. It was the signature at the bottom of the trust, mine. She went firm by firm, trying to hire new representation. But doors began closing faster than she could knock. Sorry, we're tied into a consulting agreement with a CLA affiliate. Conflict check flagged a link with Caledon Holdings. We'll have to pass. Our ethics committee is still reviewing the situation. Each rejection hit harder than the last. And none of them were angry. They were polite, clinical, detached. Like someone putting down a terminal patient with a smile and a clipboard. That's the thing about control. When it's visible, people fight it. But when it's hidden in paperwork, clauses, and dusty resolutions from subcommittees no one remembers signing, people just comply. Her world wasn't built on stone. It was built on paper. And I owned the pen. Claire's biggest client, a retail chain with deep pockets and a fragile PR reputation, sent an apologetic notice 2 days later. Due to ongoing reputational concerns and pending investigation into fiduciary conflict, we must regrettably suspend services effective immediately. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at the email, blinking. I know because her assistant forwarded it to my old inbox by mistake. She never revoked my admin access to her team's shared platform. Another oversight. Another nail. Then came the audit. Her firm, CLA Partners, had a quarterly compliance sweep. Normally routine. This one wasn't. Because Claire's financial disclosures, once praised for their efficiency, now looked like a crossword puzzle someone filled in with a Sharpie. Transactions flagged. Consulting payments questioned. Licensing trails suddenly suspicious. Her co-partner, a woman named Eliza who once toasted Claire as a force of nature, requested a closed-door meeting. The minutes were never released. But the next day, Claire's name quietly vanished from the firm's partner page. No press release. No announcement. Just gone. Meanwhile, I was nowhere to be seen. I didn't gloat. Didn't make calls. Didn't leak anything. Silence was more powerful than noise, because it let everyone else write the ending they assumed was true. That Claire had overreached. That Raymond got sloppy. That maybe they both underestimated someone along the way, but no one wanted to say who. And in that vacuum, the myth grew. The man with the folder. The ex-husband who never raised his voice. The guy who walked into court without a lawyer and walked out with the floor plan to everyone else's house. Claire tried one last move. She reached out through an old mutual friend. A woman named Sasha. The message was vague. Tell him I just want to talk. Just a conversation. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She built her empire on borrowed land. And I'd simply revoked the lease. The letter arrived by courier, no logo, just a government seal embossed on heavy cream stock. Claire opened it on her kitchen island, still dressed in workout gear she hadn't actually worked out in. She read the first line, then again. Her hands started trembling by the second paragraph. Notice of Inquiry, Office of Professional Conduct and Regulatory Oversight. The phrasing was precise, surgical, not an accusation, not yet, but a signal, a shot across the bow wrapped in bureaucratic ribbon. The complaint was anonymous, but the language was sharp enough to bleed. Conflict of interest has been identified between the respondent's role within CLA Partners LLP and their personal financial entanglements with relevant holdings and licensing streams originating from Caledon Umbrella Fund, et al. Claire dropped the letter. She didn't scream. She dialed a number. Her former co-partner, Eliza. It rang once, twice. Voicemail. She hung up. She tried Sasha. Straight to voicemail. Even Raymond wouldn't pick up. He'd ghosted her since the ethics board review. She once bragged that he was ride or die. Turns out, the moment the car caught fire, he was already at another dealership. The letter gave a date. 1 week from now. A regulatory hearing. Internal. Closed door. Mandatory appearance. 7 days later, Claire arrived at the hearing wearing her last power suit that didn't feel like armor. The receptionist gave her a name badge. It read, C. Kavanaugh, respondent. She sat at a rectangular conference table. Fluorescent lights overhead. Legal pads and coffee-stained mugs arranged with the sterile indifference of government formality. Then the door opened. Daniel walked in. Not with fury. Not with swagger. Just calm. Measured. He wore a charcoal suit. No tie. A man who'd been here before. Claire stood instinctively. What are you? Please sit, Ms. Kavanaugh. One of the officials said. Proceedings are about to begin. Claire sat slowly, her eyes never leaving him. Daniel took his seat across from her. The official continued, reading the entry into record. We are convened to review the complaint issued against CLA Partners LLP and its co-founder Claire Kavanaugh. The inquiry concerns breaches of fiduciary and ethical obligations related to undeclared financial interests, specifically involving the Caledon Umbrella Fund and affiliated trusts. Then the official turned to Daniel. Mr. Price, as principal trustee and founding partner of said fund, your testimony will be foundational to this hearing. Are you prepared to confirm your declaration? Daniel didn't look at her. He nodded once. Yes. Claire whispered, like a gasp trying to form words. You did this. He turned his head, met her eyes. No, he said, voice level. You gave me the blueprints. I just followed them. No venom, no rage, just the truth. Stripped clean of the lies she had wrapped herself in for years. Claire looked around the table. 8 people, each one flipping through thick folders marked with her initials. Highlighted pages, stamped exhibits. All roads led to her signature, to her oversight, to her ambition, the kind that never noticed what was being built under her feet. The hearing continued. Daniel answered each question with clockwork precision. Dates, names, account trails, licensing chains. His statements were supported with timestamped documentation, archived emails, and investor records. Claire's voice, when she finally spoke, cracked mid-sentence. I didn't know. I didn't see the official cut her off. We're not here for speculation, Ms. Kavanaugh. Only evidence. She looked at Daniel one last time, searching for something. Remorse, softness, maybe even pride. He gave her nothing, because she didn't deserve anything. He wasn't her husband here. He wasn't even her ex. He was the man who took notes while she bragged. The man who learned where her empire leaked. And he didn't burn it down. He just let gravity do the work. The courtroom was quieter than usual that morning. Not the dignified quiet of legal decorum, but the brittle silence of something already broken. Claire sat alone, dressed in beige like she was trying to disappear into the walls. No makeup, no jewelry, no Raymond. The chair beside her, the one he used to occupy with his swagger and whispered jokes, was empty. She fumbled with a pen, spinning it between her fingers like it could write her out of this mess. Judge Grayson entered from chambers, his robe crisp, expression unreadable. The clerk called the session to order. There were no opening statements, no arguments, just the final review of submissions. Daniel stepped forward without ceremony. No theatrics, no grand gestures, just a folder slimmer than all the others before it. He handed it to the judge with a single nod, then returned to his seat. The judge opened the folder, flipped the cover page, stopped. Then he began to read. At first it looked like boilerplate trust documentation. But then, halfway down the second page, came the detail no one could argue with. Clause 17. See all capital disbursed from the Caledon Umbrella Fund for private partnerships, including CLA Partners LLP, is to be deemed separate property of the fund originator and not to be considered marital or joint assets unless expressly stated in a rider. The rider never existed, and neither did Claire's legal claim. The judge read it twice, then again. He looked up. Mr. Price, this clause was in place prior to CLA's formation? Yes, Your Honor. Are you listed as originator of this fund? Yes. Did you notify the petitioner of this during the marriage? Daniel didn't blink. I included it in our prenup amendment, which she initialed, though I'm sure she assumed it was a non-binding appendix. The judge nodded slowly, closed the folder, and leaned back in his chair. His voice, when he spoke, was uncharacteristically gentle. This marriage dissolution, he said, does not entitle the petitioner to assets she never legally held. The court cannot divide what was never jointly acquired. Claire's jaw tightened, then slackened. Her hands went limp. The pen dropped and rolled off the table. She didn't reach for it. No, she whispered. But it wasn't a protest. It was a realization. Raymond was gone. The firm was no longer hers. The house funded through a trust. The retirement account, seeded by Caledon. Even her own startup, bootstrapped by capital she once called a favor from a silent investor, was never truly hers. It all traced back to Daniel. And Daniel? He stood, picked up his folder. No smile, no speech. He walked past her slowly, pausing just beside her chair. She turned toward him, eyes bloodshot, but still searching. Maybe for mercy, maybe for explanation. He gave her neither, just a sentence. You thought I was silent because I was weak, he said, voice low and steady. I was silent because I was calculating. And with that he walked out, past the benches, past the clerk, through the heavy wooden doors and into the corridor, where a black car waited at the curb, engine running, door open. He stepped in, the door shut, and Claire? She remained behind, surrounded by empty chairs and cold paperwork, holding a final ruling she couldn't interpret. A page full of clauses and footnotes and implications she never thought to ask about, because she never bothered to learn who he was. She was too busy talking. He was too busy building. And now it was over, not with a bang, but with a signature she didn't understand, on a war she never knew she'd already lost.